My next friend here, and I brought him, I didn't know he was going to really come until this morning, but at least he came. Dennis Boisvert. He used to work for the city of San Diego. I'll let him tell you guys all about what he used to do, but he was a real city employee who, when I first met him, came up to the city of San Diego's council and basically said, look, I'm one of your employees. I'm a medical marijuana patient. I'm right here, okay? We're really existent in your own little circle. And it kind of shocked him, and I'll tell you straight out, it shocked him. Well, now my friend is helping advise the mayor on this new ordinance and what we think he should help us with. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and allow Dennis to kind of tell you what being at that table was like too. Dennis?
Hello, my name is Dennis Boisvert. While I was employed by the city of San Diego, I took the ordinance that was existing at that time. I asked to see the city doctor, and I was certified that I had arthritis in my knee, and therefore I could use medical marijuana. The Sharps doctor gave me one of my best and favorite quotes, is when he agreed that I could use it, he says, "We won't write you a recommendation because we practice Western medicine." I says, "That's okay, I don't need it from you anyway." And then, as I went on for another 5 years to where I finally retired, I got involved with the task force. That happened coincidentally the same time I left, and I went to every task force meeting. And one of the first things I said to the task force is that this is the San Diego two-step. You guys are just going to be made fools of because they're going to do what they want and they're going to make something really restrictive, and you're the excuse for them to get away with it. Well, there was one guy who got insulted. I never saw him again. And over the time, the task force actually came up with some decent regulations and zoning laws. And sure enough, that's what the city did. And they even got so far into dirty politics that they actually took the head of the task force and sat him behind the diem. Well, what happens is when you sit him behind the diem, he can't answer. He can only answer questions succinctly that they ask. So he never got to read the letter that the task force wrote saying, what you've come up is bullshit, basically. So what ended up happening is we had to read it into the city record because they were trying to keep that from happening. And they wanted to continue to ignore it. So that's pretty much where we were. And then they even, in the process of me doing this, I started looking up the old city codes again and discovered that they actually changed it from being basically 215 verbatim to that you needed to have a medical marijuana card. Well, this is where Mark Blumel comes in, and that they went to the county and now they're forced to have the card. So now I wear the card when I go to city council meetings and say, hey, it's your responsibility to find me safe access. That's your job as a politician in California. It ain't my job. They haven't argued their way around that, but unfortunately we got a bad Supreme Court decision where they said communities, because it's federally legal, can ban it.
Yep.
Before that, we were standing on pretty solid grounds because the county actually passed a regulation because they figured they'd lose if they tried to ban it completely. But the county regulation is a de facto ban, but that's a whole other story entirely. So the city council was happy that they weren't going to have to deal with it, and this had come to, I'd go in there every once in a while and talk to them and whine to them about the shit that they pull all the time, and I know of for the last 25 years. So, and talk to them about the retirement and how they divert funds to the developers and that kind of thing. And then we got a new mayor, and the new mayor came in and he wanted to have a plan committee and wanted to introduce new regulations and a new regulation. Part of our problem is that the old regulations, the PS&S, the actual nuts and bolts of this is who's going to do the inspecting and who's going to do the certifying, was left in place, and some of the language in it, frankly, was bad. And they, in the referendum, took away the zoning. So now we had no zoning at all, and half of a regulation in place that was actually poorly worded and is even contradictory to the way state law reads it. So then the discussion was where we were going to go from here. I'd like to point out one interesting thing in this journey that I've had doing this. Somebody came up to me and said, you know, you live in the boot. And I said, the boot? He says, yeah. I said, what do you mean? He says, if you take Imperial County and San Diego County, it looks like a boot, like Italy, and that's the last of conservatism in California. So I went, damn, he's right. So, anyways, this is where we're at now, is I also am involved in an organization called the Human Solution. And basically, we are a prison outreach program and a court support program, and an education program is what we try to do. Court support has got me sitting through a lot of trials, and before I was even involved in Human Solutions or anybody, I was still going to trials. And I've sat through yours, I sat through Eugene's, I sat through a couple federal ones. I sat through the last two just recently, and it's, huh? 3. No, actually, it's been 5 or 6 I've sat through.
Yeah. And when he counts 1 or 2, he really means like 39 for each one, because I lost track of my court dates, but there was way over 30. So when he says he sat through 1 for me, he sat through 25 of those 30.
So they're getting familiar with me. In fact, the prosecutor that prosecuted her, Donna, actually knows me by my last name and can pronounce it right, which isn't an easy feat. So, anyways, the judges now are actually with the Javon Jackson case that forced them being able to use the medical marijuana defense, and the judges can't dismiss it very easily. So far I've seen that's really been a positive thing. The real solution to our issue, I think, and I won't get too much into it to let some other people speak, but is currently in the House of Representatives there's a bill called 1523. And what that will do will eliminate all this minutia, because our officials aren't going to be able to fall back on it's federally legal. What this bill simply states is any state that has a medical marijuana law, they enforce their own laws, and the federal government no longer can have anything to do with it. And it basically is being pushed. The congressman who's pushing it is actually a states' right congressman. But Hunter, he gives you the polite thing, but I'm proud to say that Susan Davis is a supporter of it. So now I would encourage people to write her a letter saying, why did you become a sponsor? So I think that is probably one of the ways that where people can be very effective, especially if they get to stay at home, is to write them and let them know. Because we're going to go around in circles with the zoning stuff forever.
Right, I agree. And they're not going to want it. Dennis, I thank you. The point Dennis is making, I'll get to you, Terry. I got you. The point Dennis is making there is we all end up having to support each other, because our community isn't that big. But believe it or not, we're pretty strong. We've proven that quite a few times in these political arenas. Okay? Terry, come on up.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Now, Terry is representing an A.S.A. group. We've had so far, I believe, a normal group. The CCC group couldn't make it, could they?
No.
I don't see
Craig, no, I think you can make it. Tell us about your group, what you guys do, and tell us more about the Mayor's Task Force, because you're also on that.
Yes, I am.
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, I want to say what a phenomenal job everybody did. Rudy Reyes took us all through the
We just
history
tried,
of the cannabis plant. Donna's been through hell and back. She did a great job telling her story. She's a lovely lady. And Dennis Boisvert with the Human Solutions took us through the mayor's issue and the task force and told us about how much court support he'd done. And William told us about his journalist, and I just really am appreciative that they were also eloquent in their speaking. So let's give them a round of applause. So I'm going to talk about just briefly, well, first of all, I'm with San Diego A.S.A. We're a small chapter of a national organization that...
A.S.A. What's A.S.A.?
Oh, Americans for Safe Access. San Diego Americans for Safe Access.
So let's say turn around.
And they are a national organization that, we have one of the national board members back here, Michelle, in the turquoise dress. She's a naturopathic doctor. Our small chapter is here in San Diego and part of a larger organization, the advance of therapeutic use of medical cannabis through the nation. The largest organization that advances the therapeutic use of medical cannabis. And in San Diego, our chapter's been active for, well, since 2003, Rudy, would you say it was 2003? Yeah, 2003. And it's gone through a lot of changes. In the very beginning, it was a very small group. Now we're, to a point where we have a board of directors and have a governing body. We hold a meeting every second Tuesday of the month in Claremont at Giovanni's Restaurant, if you ever want to go. We also have a website. I think it's on the back of my shirt, is it not? Yeah, www.safeaccesssd.org. So thank you for listening to me about my organization, but what I really want to talk about is what everybody in San Diego is talking about, the mayor, what he did for medical cannabis. We invited the mayor. We knew that he was supportive because when he was campaigning, he spoke at a couple of our rallies, one in Ocean Beach. And so we knew that he was supportive, and after he got elected, we asked him if he would come to one of our A.S.A. meetings, which he did, and he was a hellion. He got up there and we were talking about people that were going through court cases and that were being victimized by Bonnie Dumas and also the federal government for growing and smoking cannabis. And he said, well, I'll come to some of these cases if you can figure out a way to make my testimony relevant to your clients. And I think, is Mark still here?
Mark had to leave.
Okay.
He told me to apologize, but I figured I'd wait till after, but he had to leave.
Thank you. Yeah, so Mark was there, and Bob Filner offered to come to some of Mark's cases. He was very, very supportive. He also wanted to stop the raids immediately. He did not want code enforcement to be running around raiding while he was himself trying to craft an ordinance here in San Diego. So he made a lot of blustery plans, and then he ended up with the city council not supporting him on some of those plans. He did end up having to scale back a little bit, and we did have code enforcement going around and levying fines again, but they were not referring cases to the city attorney anymore, so there were no more raids and that kind of thing, or at least not that the city attorney was responsible for. And then, let me look at my little notes here. So he came to the meeting, and then, after he came to that meeting, he made good on several of his promises, and one of the most significant ones that he made good on was that he came to one of the federal hearings. A fellow named Ronnie Chang has been in federal custody for about 20 months now for growing and operating a medical cannabis dispensary up in Oceanside. And he's in a lot of trouble because in federal court you don't have a medical marijuana defense like the defendants did, like Donna did, and some of the others. Eugene was able to have his medical marijuana defense. But in federal court, that is not the case. Marijuana is not a medicine in federal court, and you're really not even allowed to mention medical marijuana in federal court. So Ronnie's in a very bad predicament. Well, the mayor showed up at Ronnie's last hearing. It was a gag order to stop Ronnie Chang's attorney, Michael McCabe, from even talking about the case. The federal government was so afraid of bad press that they gagged Ronnie Chang's attorney. And that was what the hearing was that was being conducted in the federal courthouse, and the mayor showed up and he held a press conference in front of the courthouse, then went inside the courthouse, sat with Ronnie Chang's mom and his arm around her, and allowed the judge to see that, allowed the prosecutor to see that, and then the mayor went out and had a second press conference after that where he talked about jury nullification. And that is a mechanism that the jurors can use to nullify unjust laws by way of a guilty or a not guilty verdict. So it's a way for citizens to fight back against tyranny of government in the jury pool. So he talked about that, and that was, I believe, I don't want to say the first time, because I know our founding forefathers talked about jury nullification quite a bit, and they were politicians. But in the recent history, no politician has ever gone so far as to talk about jury nullification, and our mayor did that. Mayor Filner stood in front of 4 or 5 cameras, and he talked about jury nullification for the Ronnie Chang hearing. Did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, New Hampshire actually passed a law where that has to,
That's
just
right.
at the same time,
Yeah.
that part of the defense is the option of the defense lawyer to inform the jury that they can have a verdict, but even if they find the defendant guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, but they don't agree with the law, or don't agree with the way it's being applied, they can simply find the defendant not guilty.
If it's unjust, you don't want to find the person
So
guilty.
it just holds that the jurors have a right to their verdict, they have a right to follow their conscience, and they cannot be punished for their verdicts. If they say, no, I just think that this person doesn't deserve to go to jail for a plant, and you can tell me, you can quote the law to me all day long, and I agree that it's illegal, but I don't agree with the law. I think the law is an unjust law. And a juror that says that and votes to acquit cannot be punished for their jury, which is a very, very powerful thing for the citizens of the United States. So he did that. Our mayor went out and talked about that, and I believe that the prosecution on the federal side are very, very afraid of jury nullification. They know that that can, that can gut their case. If there's just one juror that will hang up a jury because of jury nullification. So he did that for us, and I personally thought it was an amazing thing for a politician to do, and I'm really, really proud that he did that. So then the next thing he did is he started he got a bunch of the stakeholders together. Dennis was one. His partner in Human Solutions, Adela Falk, was another. A lot of attorneys, Kim Sims, Mara Felsen, a lot of stakeholders, medical marijuana, cannabis, dispensary operators. 3 members from my group, San Diego A.S.A., Eugene Davidovich, Jonathan Cohen, and myself all met with the mayor's council and advisor, and we started to craft an ordinance that we thought that would go over with the city council. Well, unfortunately, when we spoke at the city council on April 20, was it the 23rd, the 22nd? April 22nd, we did a really great job, they said, but they dusted off their old ordinance from 2011, the one that these folks were talking about, and made it even more restrictive, and decided to go with that. So now, sure.
What was funny about that meeting? We went into that meeting, and everybody in that meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, basically agreed the old 2011 ordinance at the beginning was too restrictive, and that's why it got pulled. By the end of the meeting, they revamped that old 2011 ordinance, dusted it off, and we're all agreeing to add more restrictions to it.
San Diego two-step.
That's right.
Yeah. They added some kind of restriction that makes dispensaries illegal within 100 feet of residence. Yep. They upped the sensitive use from 600 to 1,000 feet, and then one other restriction, they added churches and recovery centers or something. Yes. So now we've got an even more restrictive ordinance than what we referendized in the last, when you were talking about the PCA referendizing in 2011. Now we're looking at an even more restrictive ordinance than that one. So we're just fighting for zoning right now. So I do have some handouts. I don't have very many of them, but I have some handouts that show the zoning. I'm going to set them up here at the table. Perfect. And then we can see what those zonings look like for each. We have the mayor's zoning, the city council's old ordinance as far as zoning, their new ordinance, and we can see just where they're saying that we can have dispensaries here in San Diego. But in closing, I just want to say that our mayor has been phenomenal in this issue. Despite what's going on around right now, we really have to. I'm a single issue voter, and I think that I would support the mayor no matter what's going on, because he really has come to bat for us in this vastly unjust and traumatic situation here in San Diego, where many people's lives are ruined by this, and the mayor is coming forward for us and really helping. So in closing, I'd just like to say that, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. As you see, there aren't many of us, but we've had to learn laws beyond lawyers sometimes. We've had to learn certain things because we are caught in this little circle, and we have to know what we're doing. If not, they're going to try to attack us for us. So the idea here is very simple. I'm looking to you as other activists to understand. You came to learn. I presented this subject to you as best I could. This is the history. This is San Diego. This is our problem. And we're about to have an ordinance that they're trying to drop on us within City Council. It's all being pushed by politicians, just to add restrictions to add restrictions. And it's not the will of the people. It's not what we really want. Obviously, we're having people being pulled out of courts, and we're wasting money in the courts on this. It's just wrong in the way it's being handled. So I'm asking you, write a letter to councilmen. Come to our meetings at City Council. Speak with us, because we need you. Just like I only have so many here and I couldn't have done this meeting alone, I need your help too. That's why I ask. Going back again, I thank Activist San Diego as a group for supporting us and allowing us to bring forth this issue. And I hope you all support KNSJ, because that's where you're gonna hear other stories like this. We want to allow people to tell their stories so you actually see the effectors or the effects of this. I'd like to quickly open up to questions, answers, if you guys would like to do that. Any questions for the panel, for what's left of the panel? Nope.
First of all, I want to thank Rudy and all the panelists for always enlightening us and bringing an issue closer to our hearts and our minds and getting us to understand more deeply how this affects people. I'm going to hand around a donation box because social justice, while it moves on volunteers and goodwill, also needs some financial support. We'd love to have you as a member of Activist San Diego for just $2 a month. You can become a member of Activist San Diego and keep this going. And then I want to just ask a question. My wife, when she was suddenly diagnosed with brain cancer and had daily chemo and full brain radiation, asked for a half dozen times, asked for medical marijuana from Scripps Green Clinic, and it was actually almost a month before they gave her a prescription for Marinol, but never was there any indication on what seemed to be very good-hearted physicians to prescribe anything other than a pharmaceutical. And so I guess my question is, how often does that happen, and what can be done about that aspect as well?
I can address it and I'll pass it down to be addressed. With my situation as a burn survivor, my doctor and hospital wouldn't recommend me marijuana. Out of UCSD, he would recommend me Marinol, but then on the side would tell me not to take it because it's deadly to the body. 3 out of the 4 chemicals used to make Marinol are poisonous to the human body. And as he explained, in making it from being an oil-based, where marijuana is oil-based, to water-based, it's a lot more dangerous and addictive. So in doing that, he was very afraid of me being on this Marinol. The big reason, in my opinion, is they're afraid of losing their license. They're afraid that if they were to prescribe marijuana, they'd be attacked by their federal oversight and lose their license.
Like I said too, was the exact same situation. It happens every day, all day, because the DEA literally has threatened administrative heads of hospitals that, look, we can shut you down like that. Come in, confiscate the patient records to look for your illegal da-da-da. And so they just make blanket across the board. Could I just say one thing too? That there's a lot of this zoning stuff. And one thing is, we're talking about a plant that should be as cheap to grow as tomatoes in your backyard, or it's a little more expensive if you grow it in your house, but the reason people are paying $300 or $400 an ounce is because of prohibition.
That's right.
Some politicians are actually going around and there's some cronyism going on. Because if they take away the right of the people to collectively associate, what happens is if they can have 1 or 2 stores, they can give them to their friends. And there is some of that already starting to go on, and I guess, it's a sensitive area. But nobody should have to be paying more than about $100 an ounce for this plant.
I've told my personal physicians that I use it regularly for controlling pain with my arthritis. Over the years, I've actually converted the way a couple doctors think about it. One of my favorites was a orthopedic surgeon who's been around for years in San Diego and was very conservative. And I asked him once if he'd write a recommendation for me, and I thought he was gonna die. And he recommended that I go over and see his assistant because there was some experimental drugs. But the experimental drugs had all sorts of side effects, and I says, you want me to give up something that I'm controlling the pain with that doesn't have any side effects for something that does, right? This is the idea. Then it'd be kind of stupid for me to get involved, wouldn't it? So that was pretty much where I left it with his office, but the next time I came back, he actually studied it. And he realized it had good properties. So if you can get people to look at it and think instead of listening to propaganda, it helps. My personal physician, the new one, the same thing, I tell them I use it. She says, I can't write a recommendation for you because the office is conservative and they flip out. I have a blood malady that requires me to go to a cancer center, and I gave the county paperwork to the doctor there who's now retired. He was perfectly happy to fill it out so that the state could write a recommendation. But it is a matter of education, and I often think of it, it's like being a born-again Baptist, you know, you gotta go out and sell it.
Any other questions? Any other questions out there?
We'd prefer people to take the microphone
Yep,
so
that's
that we
what
can
I
get
was trying to do.
a better recording too, thanks.
Quick question for you. When they go in and raid a clinic and take everything, in your experience, has anyone come back and said, well, they took the records and they're after me now? Tell me
Yes.
what that situation is.
There have been a few raids that I've seen, and I'll again pass it down. There have been a few raids that I've seen where they've literally come in, seize the records, all the computer paperwork, everything there was. And in my opinion, it's a violation of HIPAA. You know, we have certain rights here under federal laws, and that's a huge violation of HIPAA. According to them, it doesn't matter because under DEA laws, anything associated to is in their pocket. So, from what I've seen, they don't care about HIPAA. In regards to patient records, I don't know where my records are sitting anymore because my records have sitting at least 2 places that they've raided. So who knows who has that information?
They haven't stopped.